Welcome to Riks Europe and this week's Riks Round Up. In the panel today, Peter Klepper and Elias Norgren. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Are you ready for a new roundup and a new year?
Definitely.
There's been a lot of exciting stuff that has happened so far in 2025.
Yeah, for such a short amount of time, there will be a lot to cover. We will be talking about Musk and Zuckerberg. These are things that cannot be avoided. Censorship, EU threatening Meta, fact-checking, and also Trump versus Greenland. Is that about right today?
Yes.
So I think we'll start off with Musk. He has been told not to speak his mind, and EU has been checking whether speech violates EU law. Can you explain what's going on, Elias?
Well, Musk has been making a lot. Elon Musk, that is the owner of X and the owner of Tesla, and just all around tech billionaire, has been making a lot of headlines recently due to his many surprising, oftentimes, takes on European and American politics. And one of the reasons that this has caused, as you said, this is basically an inquiry from the EU about whether or not he is violating hate speech laws, is because he is interviewing the party leader of the AfD, the party in Germany, the nationalist party in Germany, Alice Weidel. And this will take place on his platform X, and it will air on Friday, I believe. And this is actually because the German the public service channels of Germany are not actually allowing the AfD party leader to be present at their debates, which is, of course, Germany's holding a snap election in February this year. So I think this is pretty much only fair that Elon Musk is giving a voice to the party leader of what is essentially the biggest party in the country. They're neck and neck with the Christian Democratic Union at the very least. And it only goes to show that the EU does not hold free speech and most of the democratic values that they are supposed to hold up. They don't really value them all that much, because what matters to them in the end is obviously the narrative that they're driving, essentially the liberal world order that, of course, AfD is challenging, and Elon Musk is to a large extent also challenging it by being very vocal about supporting nationalism in Europe and all of these anti-establishment parties. And that's why they're upset with him. That's why they're coming after him legally.
And Peter, staying on the subject of Elon Musk, he's said to have provoked fury across Europe in recent weeks because of attacks to the continent's leaders. Could you tell us more about this and why it is said to have sparked such fury?
Musk is he's really on a roll. He's been attacking the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, for not doing enough against the grooming scandal. In Germany, he has been criticizing Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor. He's been calling the Alternative for Germany the last hope for the country. And now, we'll have this debate or interview between Alice Weidel and Musk. Now, I think the real problem here is that the European Union has this regulation. It's called the Digital Services Act. And so far, this was, let's say, a largely theoretical threat to free speech. We had this French European Commissioner threatening Musk that if he was going to interview Trump, that he better, pay attention. But at the end of the day, that was largely theoretical. Everybody was sort of laughing it off. But now we basically have this EU legislation intervening into a national election. We have the February German election, and indeed the leader of an important party, the AfD, which is, I think, fair to say they have a wing that you could call far right in Eastern Germany. Now the term has been so inflated that nobody takes it serious anymore, but I do think they have a number of problematic figures there. But then Alice Weidel, she calls herself a libertarian. She calls her own party a libertarian. And they also have that wing, a more libertarian conservative wing. Apart from that, of course, Musk and Weidel should be free to go on any platform they feel like without bureaucrats supervising if they actually respect the legislation of the EU or not. At the moment, we have 150 EU experts, 150 that are engaged to supervise this particular debate. So we really have to ask ourselves, okay, where is this heading? I'm from Belgium. I looked it up. And in the Belgian constitution, which is almost 200 years old, there's a special provision for media freedom. So the Belgian constitution basically guarantees media that if they are accused of a crime like slander or something similar, a speech crime, that they are not being judged by a regular judge, but by a jury. Because back then it was seen as incredibly important to protect freedom of speech and the freedom of the media. Now, today's media is X, it's Facebook, it's Instagram. And the last thing that we want is some bureaucrats from a supranational body intervening into what can be said and what cannot be said.
And Elias, this brings us to EU apparently threatening Meta. Could you tell us about this?
Well, this is also in the same vein as I was onto earlier, that the EU obviously does not value free speech, even though it tends to cosmetically claim to uphold the values of free speech and all of these democratic values. Now, what Mark Zuckerberg of Meta did in the past few days is actually to announce that he will cease the so-called fact-checking on the Meta platforms, that being Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. And because Mark Zuckerberg has recognized that the fact-checking complex that has been holding its grip on the Western world, the dialogue in the Western world, the political dialogue really, for the last few years, has only really been silencing a lot of legitimate, often political critiques of things such as the pandemic lockdowns, such as immigration policy, and all of these things that you just left people very frustrated with Mark Zuckerberg and all the Meta platforms, because they keep getting banned on these platforms. They can't post whatever they want on these platforms. They can't post legitimate political content, at least. And it's good to see that Mark Zuckerberg has actually realized that this is just causing a big stain on his reputation, and he's actually walking back on this, and he will try to cherish free speech on his platforms again. And this is, of course, something that the EU does not approve of, as that would mean that its own narrative and all of these liberal parties, all of the liberal media, essentially all of their narratives will essentially crumble, because there will be so many better alternatives. I mean, this is on social media. That is mostly where all of these right-wing populist parties, nationalist parties, that is where they grew to prominence. That is where a lot of people first came to know of their existence. So this is where a lot of the debate on many of our time's most pressing issues, such as immigration, has taken place. And hopefully this will allow Mark Zuckerberg renegating on the fact-checking there, the so-called fact-checking, will lead to these platforms being, once again, I believe, bastions of free speech, perhaps, I mean, in theory at least. And that is why the EU is trying to come after him with basically using the same means as using which they're trying to silence Elon Musk and Alice Weidel, of course, with their, sort of Orwellian speech laws, the DSA, which controls a lot of the digital, space on what actually is allowed to be shared there.
And Peter, there seems to be two sides, of course, to this debate: those who want to protect free speech, and those who say that it's being manipulated by these tech billionaires. How do you think this will play out?
I mean, what Elias is saying is absolutely right. And it looks like they're also here implementing the DSA, the Digital Services Act, which has provisions for imposing what it calls trusted flaggers. Now, you can apply to become a trusted flagger. A number of entities, some NGOs, have been qualified as trusted flaggers, amongst others by the German government. It's the national government that can give this qualification. It's not entirely clear what your power will be, but it's looking like these will be sort of entities that have some legal power to declare something a fact or false on social media. Now, it's easy to see how this will go wrong. If you just look at examples of where fact checkers had it wrong, I just saw something of 2020 where the idea or the theory of a lab leak was qualified as wrong. So the idea that COVID had emerged from a Chinese lab. Now, today in 2025, most experts think that this is actually the most likely explanation, because there's lab leaks all the time, and certainly in China. Now, the story is that the fact checker behind Facebook labeling this theory as false had a conflict of interest. So there's been many examples of this. And there's also no shame of not being able to come up with the truth. Even in science, everything is very speculative, and something can be true until proven false. I mean, that's what science is all about. It's all about doubt, about constant challenging of the truth. But of course, in the bureaucratic world of the European Union, people look at it quite differently. And what Zuckerberg is doing, for now, he would not be rolling this out in Europe. But if he would, this may well be in violation of this new piece of EU legislation that I think we have to get rid of as soon as possible.
And moving on to Trump versus Greenland. Elias, can you tell us what is the connection here?
Well, I mean, much of Elon Musk's recent activity has of course been attributed to the victory of Donald Trump in the U.S. Presidential election. And of course, I mean, that causes, even before he has even taken office, Donald Trump is out with all of these geopolitical ambitions that he's voicing. So, for example, he wants the United States to purchase Greenland from Denmark. He's threatened Denmark with punitive tariffs and perhaps even military intervention if he is not allowed to purchase this major island from the Danish. And besides Greenland, there's also the claim that it's not really a claim. I think it's more of a teasing. He's teasing the Canada that it must become the 51st state of the United States. And he's also aired some ideas about renaming the Mexican Gulf to the American Gulf. And I think all of these ideas, some of them are a bit silly, some of them are a bit you're not really supposed to take them seriously. There's also the purchase of, the retaking, I suppose you could call it, of the Panama Canal, which is something that Trump was also talking about. I think you should take all of these claims just view them in the light of Trump representing a different kind of geopolitical order that has been contrary to the one that has been established in the West for the past few decades. Now, I don't really take all of these things all that super seriously. A lot of people in Europe obviously are doing so because they believe that there's seriosity behind Donald Trump's threats. I believe that these are more negotiation tactics more than anything else. But it's interesting to see just how many of the old European leaders that has been part of the establishments that has been ruling our continent for the past few decades are really, they don't know how to handle this. They don't know how to handle that the United States is once again sort of expressing imperialist ambitions as it did just a century ago. They're not really used to that type of world order anymore.
Peter, do you agree? Is that what is happening here?
You could say, it's just Trump, hyperbole. He wants to make a point. And when it comes to Greenland, he actually has a point that, we see a lot more Russian and Chinese military activity in that area. The West, allies of the United States like Britain, have been weakened. Its navy is no longer capable of patrolling the area around Greenland as it used to. British MPs have pointed out, and they have even provided this as the reason why Trump has come forward again with his Greenland suggestion. So that's one thing. But on the other, I agree with Elias that sort of Trump is moving the Overton window, so to speak. He's talking raw power. this indeed goes against sort of the current mainstream mindset in international affairs. And, as much as I think that Trump has actually been a relatively good president when it comes to foreign policy during his first term, precisely because he was not an interventionist. At the end of the day, he was actually quite diplomatic in practice. Even talked to North Korea. Now, maybe the jury is still out on that, but I think it's been a while now, and the situation has been stable in relative terms. So at least it's not been the complete disaster that opponents of Trump's approach to North Korea said it would be. But here I'm a little concerned that Trump is abandoning actually his forte, which is to be more, diplomatic in the real sense of the word, wary of neoconservative interventions. Of course, he would say, yeah, but I do it like not to bring democracy or something, but for the American interest. But I do think it's a bit of a slippery slope, and I do think you can see that he's getting a little bit overconfident, and perhaps he will realize that ultimately, if he wants to achieve the maximum pressure on adversaries like China and Russia, it's not a good idea to embarrass allies like Denmark, but even like Canada. I mean, Team Trump doesn't really like the liberals, or I would call them progressives, and the camp of Justin Trudeau. But at the end of the day, Canada is a solid Western ally, and I hope that Trump will understand that this does not really help his cause in the end.
I think with regards to how serious you're supposed to be taking this, how concerned you're supposed to be. I mean, he did threaten to nuke North Korea as well. I mean, we all know how that actually ended up. It ended up with just a diplomatic reapproachment between the two nations. So I think that a lot of constructive things can come out of just shaking the West awake, sort of, to these types of issues. We know that Europe, for example, has just been incredibly naive and just leaving out all of its defenses. As you said, there's no naval patrol around Greenland anymore. No European nation has any particular naval force or any type of military force that is worth mentioning. Maybe perhaps with the exception of France and the United Kingdom, but then again, it's also very limited. So I think that there's a lot of Europe just needs to wake up to these to this, which is mostly, I would say, an undeniable reality of the world that we're actually living in. I mean, the past few decades of the sort of the Pax Americana, or the world order after World War II has been more of an exception than the rule, obviously. I mean, this is more of a return to 1800s of the geopolitics of the 19th century, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, because it forces the European nations to rethink what they've been doing with all this globalism and all of this integration for the past few decades. I think a lot of good things can come out of this. That being said, I don't really condone an American occupation of Greenland. But just to be worth saying, I don't really support that. But I think a lot of good things can come out of just the rhetorical device of saying that actually maybe the United States should just own Greenland.
Well, at the end of the day, Trump may just offer 1 million per inhabitant of Greenland, and there are 50,000 people living there. So that would be 50 billion, right? If I calculate it well, which is affordable for the United States. The Fed can print it. So would the Greenlanders say no to that?
Well, what does more debt? What harm does that do?
So we shouldn't give too many ideas here. Thank you, Elias Nordgren and Peter Klepper, for your insight.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Riks Europe.